What if the love you thought was perfect started with a lie? Discover how a bet between millionaires turned into a story of true love, overcoming and forgiveness that will make you rethink everything you know about relationships. Follow Lucas and Molly's journey, where secrets are revealed, insecurities are overcome, and the true meaning of love is rediscovered. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The twinkling lights of New York shone through the huge windows of Skyline, an exclusive bar at the top of a skyscraper in Manhattan. Lucas Hawthorne, age 32, with perfectly combed brown hair and an impeccable Armani suit, raised his glass of champagne, a victorious smile plastered on his angular face. "Hawthorne Enterprises has just closed the biggest deal of the year, gentlemen," he announced, his deep voice echoing through the sophisticated surroundings. "That deserves a proper celebration." His friends, all dressed in expensive suits and luxury watches, applauded and toasted. The group of 5 men occupied the VIP area of the bar, surrounded by attentive waiters and a panoramic view of the city that never sleeps. "Lucas, my man," said Nathaniel, a Wall Street investor with shrewd eyes. "You really do have the Midas touch. But tell me, is there anything you can't conquer?" The millionaire laughed, running his hand along his clean-shaven chin. "I haven't yet found anything I couldn't have, Nate. You know my motto, impossible is just an opinion." It was then that Dominic, the youngest of the group, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, leaned forward. "How about a different challenge, Lucas? Something that tests not your pocket, but your heart." The atmosphere changed subtly. The other men approached, intrigued. Lucas arched an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Go on, Dom. What do you have in mind?" Dominic smiled, a smile that mixed mischief and defiance. "What if you married someone who doesn't fit your standard of beauty? Someone ordinary?" A momentary silence fell over the group, broken only by the clink of ice in the whiskey glasses. Lucas frowned, his green eyes fixed on Dominic. "Elaborate," he said, his voice a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Think about it, Lucas," Dominic continued, gesturing with his glass. "You've always had the most stunning women in New York. Models, actresses, socialites. But what if the real challenge was to find beauty where others don't see it?" The other men murmured in agreement, clearly amused by the idea. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the marble table. "Interesting," he muttered. "But what would be the point? Apart from satisfying your morbid curiosity, of course." Nathaniel intervened, his eyes sparkling at the prospect of a new game. "Think of the headlines, Lucas. Millionaire finds true love with ordinary woman. It would be PR gold. It would show a more human side to Hawthorne Enterprises." Lucas pondered for a moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. The idea was absurd, of course, but there was something about it that intrigued him, a challenge that went beyond the numbers and contracts he was used to. "Very well, gentlemen," he finally said, a smile forming on his lips. "I accept the challenge. But on one condition, you choose the woman." The friends exchanged looks of surprise and excitement. They hadn't expected Lucas to accept so easily. "We have the perfect person," said Dominic, pulling out his smartphone. After a few seconds of searching, he turned the screen to Lucas. "Molly Jenkins, 28 years old, librarian, lives in Brooklyn." Lucas looked at the photo. Molly was, as Dominic had suggested, ordinary. Brown hair without a buzz cut, simple glasses, a shy smile, nothing that would normally catch your eye. "Perfect," said Lucas, his voice firm. "Get a date. Let's see where it goes." The friends laughed and toasted again, excited about their new bet. Lucas, however, felt a twinge of uncertainty. He was about to embark on something completely out of his comfort zone. A few days later, Lucas found himself in front of the New York Public Library, the place he had chosen for his first date with Molly. He adjusted his tie, feeling strangely nervous. When Molly appeared, walking up the stairs with a book clutched to her chest, Lucas felt something unexpected. She wasn't stunning in the conventional sense, but there was a gracefulness to her movements, a light in her brown eyes that caught him off guard. "Hello," she said, holding out her hand. "You must be Lucas." As he shook her hand, Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. Suddenly, the bet seemed much more complex than he had imagined. "Hello, Molly," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "It's a pleasure to meet you." As they walked into the library, Lucas couldn't help thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was about to discover a new kind of challenge. One that could change not only his public image, but also his heart. The scent of old books filled the air as Lucas followed Molly through the corridors of the New York Public Library. Their footsteps echoed softly on the marble floor, creating a silent symphony that contrasted with the constant bustle of the Manhattan streets outside. "This is my favorite section," whispered Molly, her eyes sparkling behind her simple glasses as she gestured to an area filled with oak bookshelves. "Classic literature. Each book here is a window into a different world." Lucas watched her intently, noticing how her face lit up as she talked about the books. It was a genuine enthusiasm that he rarely saw in his usual social circle. "I confess I don't read much apart from financial reports," Lucas admitted, feeling strangely vulnerable. Molly smiled, not with pity, but with understanding. "Well then, you're in the right place for an introduction. How about we start with something light?" She pulled a book from the shelf, her hands touching the cover reverently. The Great Gatsby, by F. Scott Fitzgerald. A story about the American dream, love, and the endless search for happiness. Lucas picked up the book, his fingers brushing Molly's for a brief moment. "It seems relevant," he said, surprised by the sudden connection he felt with the book's premise. They spent the afternoon in the library, Molly guiding Lucas through a maze of stories and ideas. To his surprise, Lucas found himself completely absorbed, fascinated not only by the books, but by the passion with which Molly spoke about them. "You know," said Molly, as they sat at a far table, "books teach us empathy. They allow us to live 1,000 lives different from our own." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "I'd never thought of it like that. In my life, it's always been about numbers, strategies, tangible results. And there's nothing wrong with that," Molly replied gently. "But sometimes, it's in the intangible things that we find true value." Her words stayed with Lucas, echoing in his mind even after they left the library. The afternoon sun was bathing Central Park in a golden hue when they decided to go for a walk. "This is my refuge in the city," said Molly, taking a deep breath of the fresh park air. "A reminder that even in the midst of concrete and steel, there's still room for nature." Lucas looked around, seeing the park with new eyes. Families picnicking, street performers, people simply enjoying the day. It was a completely different world from his own, full of simplicity and genuine joy. "Come on, I want to show you something," said Molly, taking his hand without thinking. Lucas felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest at her touch. They arrived at a small pond, where a group of people were gathered, feeding the ducks. Molly greeted several of them by name, introducing Lucas with a warm smile. "These are my friends from the neighborhood," she explained. "We meet here every Sunday for a community picnic." Lucas observed the interactions, noting the ease with which Molly blended in, her hearty laugh echoing through the air. It was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated social events he was used to. "Hey, Lucas," called out an elderly man, offering a piece of bread. "Would you like to feed the ducks?" Hesitating, Lucas accepted the bread. As he threw the pieces into the water and watched the ducks approach, he felt a simple, childlike joy that he hadn't experienced for years. As the sun began to set, Lucas and Molly sat on a nearby bench, watching the colors of the sky change. "Thank you for today," said Lucas, his voice low and sincere. "It was unlike anything I'm used to." Molly smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "Different good or different bad?" "Definitely good," Lucas replied, surprising himself with his own honesty. "You know, sometimes I feel like I live in a bubble, surrounded by luxury but disconnected from the real world." Molly looked at him curiously. "And how does that make you feel?" Lucas paused, pondering. It was the first time anyone had asked him that question. "Lonely, I guess. There's constant pressure to keep up appearances, to be the Lucas Hawthorne that everyone expects me to be." "And who is the Lucas Hawthorne you want to be?" asked Molly softly. The question took him by surprise. Lucas looked at the horizon, feeling a vulnerability that he usually avoided at all costs. I don't know, he finally admitted. I don't think I've ever really asked myself that. Molly placed her hand on his, a simple gesture of comfort. Well, maybe this is your chance to find out. As the sky turned shades of purple and orange, Lucas felt something change inside him. The bet, the business, everything seemed distant at that moment. There, sitting on a park bench with Molly, he felt more authentic than he had ever been. Maybe you're right, he said, a genuine smile forming on his lips. Maybe this is my chance to turn over a new leaf. And so, under the twilight New York sky, Lucas Hawthorne began to glimpse a new chapter in his life, one that promised to be richer and more meaningful than any deal he had ever closed. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled Molly's small apartment in Brooklyn. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her best friend, Olivia, a woman with curly hair and a warm smile. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the steaming cups in front of them. So, Olivia began, leaning forward with a curious look on her face. Tell me all about this Lucas Hawthorne. Is it true that he's as charming as the magazines say? Molly blushed slightly, swirling the spoon in her cup. He's different from what I expected. More genuine, you know? Olivia arched an eyebrow, her face expressing a mixture of skepticism and concern. Moll, you know I only want the best for you, right? But I can't help worrying. I mean, he's Lucas Hawthorne. What does a millionaire playboy want with a librarian? Olivia's words hung heavy in the air, echoing the very doubts Molly had been trying to ignore. She bit her lip, her eyes fixed on the rippling surface of the coffee. I know it sounds strange, Molly admitted, but when we're together, I feel like he really sees me, not as an achievement or a charity project, but as myself. Olivia sighed, reaching out to take Molly's hand. Darling, you're amazing. Smart, compassionate, beautiful inside and out. I just don't want you to get hurt. Men like Lucas Hawthorne, well, they have a reputation. Molly nodded slowly, feeling a knot forming in her stomach. Olivia's words brought up insecurities that she had been trying to bury ever since she had met Lucas. What if, Molly hesitated, her voice almost a whisper, what if he realizes that I'm not enough, that I'm just an ordinary girl from Brooklyn? Olivia squeezed her hand, her eyes full of compassion. Oh, Moll, you're more than enough. If he can't see that, then he doesn't deserve you. Her friend's words, although comforting, couldn't completely dispel the doubts that were now simmering in Molly's mind. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Lucas was facing his own challenges. Sitting in his office in the Hawthorne Enterprises penthouse, he found himself surrounded by familiar faces, but unfamiliar expressions. Lucas, have you lost your mind? The voice of his father, Theodore Hawthorne, cut through the air like a sharp blade. A librarian? What are you thinking? Lucas took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. Dad, Molly is more than just her profession. She's intelligent, compassionate, and completely unsuitable for our social position, interrupted his mother, Victoria, her tone cold and calculating. Think of what people will say, Lucas. The company's image. Frustration bubbled up inside Lucas. He looked around the room, seeing the worried faces of his parents and the disapproving glances of his closest associates. Since when do we care so much about what other people think? Retorted Lucas, his voice rising slightly. Wasn't it innovation and thinking outside the box that built this empire? Theodore slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. This is different, Lucas, and you know it. There are expectations, traditions. Outdated traditions, Lucas muttered, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Victoria approached, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. Darling, we only want what's best for you. Think carefully before you make any rash decisions. The words of his parents and associates echoed in Lucas' mind long after the meeting was over. Sitting alone in his office, he wondered if he was really doing the right thing. That evening, Lucas and Molly met in a small cafe away from the prying eyes and flashes of the paparazzi. The cozy atmosphere contrasted with the palpable tension between them. "Lucas," Molly began, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked at her, noticing the vulnerability in her eyes. "What is it, Molly?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When I was a teenager, I went through a difficult time. The other students, they constantly tormented me. They said I was ugly, strange, that I would never be loved." Lucas felt his heart squeeze as he saw tears forming in Molly's eyes. "I know it may seem silly now," she continued, "but those words, they stayed with me. They shaped the way I see myself, the way I relate to others." Lucas reached out, taking her hand firmly. "Molly, No, please, let me finish," she interrupted softly. "What I'm trying to say is, I'm afraid, Lucas, afraid of not being enough for you, for your world." Molly's words hit Lucas like a punch in the gut. He saw in her not only the woman he was learning to love, but also a mirror of his own insecurities and fears. "Molly," he said, his voice charged with emotion, "you're more than enough. In fact, it's me who fears I'm not up to it. You've shown me a world beyond business and money, a world of real connections and real emotions." As they looked into each other's eyes, they both realized that they were on the verge of something profound and transformative. The doubts and pressures of the outside world still existed, but in that moment, in the warmth of that small cafe, they found comfort and understanding in each other. The road ahead would be challenging, full of obstacles and trials. But there, that night, Lucas and Molly silently vowed to face these storms together, one step at a time. The rising sun was painting the New York skyline in shades of pink and orange when Lucas Hawthorne made a decision that would change the course of his life. Sitting in his penthouse office, he gazed out at the awakening city, feeling a determination he had never experienced before. With a deep sigh, Lucas picked up his phone and started making calls. One by one, he canceled meetings, delegated responsibilities, and, to the shock of many, announced that he would be taking an indefinite leave of absence from Hawthorne Enterprises. "But, Mr. Hawthorne," stammered his assistant, Veronica, on the other end of the line, "what about the merger with Apex Corp? What about the dinner with the Japanese investors?" "Cancel everything, Veronica," Lucas replied, his voice firm but gentle. "There's something more important I need to do now." Hanging up the phone, Lucas felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he wasn't the CEO, the heir, the millionaire playboy. He was just Lucas, a man in search of something real. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Molly woke up to a text message from Lucas. "Meet me in Prospect Park in an hour. I have a surprise." Intrigued and a little nervous, Molly quickly got ready, opting for a simple floral dress and her favorite sneakers. When she arrived at the park, she found Lucas sitting on a bench, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, a look she had never seen on him before. "Lucas," she called out, approaching him hesitantly, "is everything all right?" He stood up, a radiant smile lighting up his face. "I've never been better, Molly. Come on, I want to show you something." Taking her hand, Lucas led her along a winding path until they reached a small lake. There, to Molly's surprise, was a rowing boat. "I thought we could spend the day together," explained Lucas, helping her into the boat. "No interruptions, no pressure, just the two of us." As they rowed along the tranquil lake, Lucas shared his decision to temporarily step away from business. Molly listened intently, her eyes widening in surprise. "But Lucas, your company, your family, they'll survive," he said with a soft smile. "I realized that I spent so much time building an empire that I forgot to build a life, a real life, with genuine connections." Molly felt her heart race at his words. "And what do you hope to find in this new life?" Lucas stopped rowing, looking deeply into her eyes. "Honesty, authenticity, and if I'm lucky, maybe even true love." The day passed like a dream. They explored hidden corners of the park, shared a simple picnic, and talked for hours, revealing fears, hopes, and dreams they had never shared with anyone before. As the sun began to set, They found themselves lying on a quiet lawn, watching the first stars appear in the velvety sky. "You know," Molly began, her voice soft in the stillness of the night, "I've always dreamed of traveling the world, visiting the great libraries, seeing the places I've read about in books." Lucas turned to her, his eyes shining with a sudden idea. "And what's stopping you?" Molly laughed softly. "Oh, work, responsibilities, lack of money." "What if none of that was an obstacle?" asked Lucas, sitting up suddenly. "What if we could go anywhere, see anything?" Molly looked at him, a mixture of hope and skepticism in her eyes. "Lucas, what are you suggesting?" "An adventure," he replied, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. "A journey to discover who we really are, away from the expectations and pressures of New York." Molly's heart raced at the possibility. It was crazy, of course, leaving everything behind and embarking on an adventure with a man she barely knew. But there was something in the way Lucas looked at her, a sincerity in his eyes that made her want to believe it. "What about your job, your life here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas took her hands in his. "Molly, in the last few days with you, I've learned more about myself and what really matters than I have in years of running a company. I'm ready for a change. The question is, are you?" Molly closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. When she opened them again, there was a newfound determination in them. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm. "I'm ready." At that moment, under the New York stars, Lucas and Molly began to plan not just a trip, but a journey of self-discovery. They discussed destinations, made lists, and most importantly, shared their fears and expectations. Said Lucas, as they walked hand in hand back to the city, "when I took that stupid bet, I never imagined I'd meet someone like you." Molly stopped, turning to him with a confused expression. "What bet?" Lucas's blood ran cold, realizing his slip. The euphoria of the moment had made him let his guard down, and now he was faced with a dilemma that could destroy everything they had built. "Molly, he began, his voice trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you." As night fell over New York, Lucas prepared to reveal the truth about how it all began, knowing that his next words could change the course of their relationship forever. The soft sound of pencil sliding across paper filled Molly's small apartment. Sitting at her desk, she scribbled furiously in her diary, her emotions overflowing in every written word. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, casting dancing shadows over the pages. "Dear Diary," she wrote, her normally elegant handwriting now shaky and hurried. "It's only 2 weeks until the wedding, and I'm terrified. Not for the engagement to Lucas. That, strangely, is the only thing I'm sure of. It's everything else that scares me." Molly stopped, looking at her reflection in the small mirror on the desk. Her eyes, normally bright and full of life, looked tired and apprehensive. She touched her face, tracing the lines she saw there, lines that seemed deeper and more evident with each day that brought the wedding closer. "Lucas's family," she continued, "they are so perfect, elegant, sophisticated, everything I'm not. How can I fit into that world?" A knot formed in her throat as memories of her last visit to the Hawthorne mansion flooded her mind. The appraising looks, the barely disguised whispers, the constant feeling of being judged and found wanting. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Olivia, her voice full of concern on the other end of the line. "Moll, you've disappeared. Is everything all right?" Molly hesitated, feeling the tears she had held back for so long finally overflow. "I don't know, Liv. I don't know if I can do this." "Oh, honey," Olivia's voice softened. "What's going on?" The words gushed out of Molly like a broken dam. She talked about her insecurities, about how inadequate she felt next to Lucas's family, about the fear of disappointing everyone, especially him. "What if I'm an embarrassment to him, Liv? What if, on the wedding day, everyone looks at me and thinks, 'What did he see in her?'" Olivia listened patiently, letting Molly vent. When the flow of words finally subsided, she spoke, her voice firm and reassuring. "Molly Jenkins, listen to me. You are the most incredible person I know, intelligent, compassionate, and with a heart the size of the world. If Lucas's family can't see that, it's their problem, not yours." Molly sniffled, a small smile forming on her lips. "You have to say that. You're my best friend." "Exactly," Olivia replied, "which means I know you better than anyone." "Moll, Lucas chose you for a reason. He sees in you what we all see, an extraordinary woman." Olivia's words brought a comforting warmth to Molly's chest, but doubts still lingered, whispering in her mind. "But what if I'm not enough? What if I can't fit into his world?" "Darling," Olivia said softly, "it's not about fitting into his world. It's about creating a world together, one that's true to both of you." Molly nodded, even though Olivia couldn't see her. "You're right. I know you are. It's just, sometimes it's hard to believe that." "Then let me believe it for you," Olivia replied. "Now, how about we meet for coffee? I think you need to get out of this apartment and remember how amazing you are." Molly agreed, silently thanking herself for having such a wonderful friend. After hanging up, she looked in the mirror again, trying to see herself through Olivia's eyes, through Lucas's eyes. But the insecurities were persistent, and as she prepared to leave, Molly couldn't help feeling a wave of anxiety at the thought of the wedding rehearsal that would take place in a few days. The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparations and growing anxiety. Every dress fitting, every meeting with the wedding planner, every interaction with Lucas's family seemed to amplify Molly's doubts. The night before the wedding rehearsal, Molly found herself sitting on her bed, staring at her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to send Lucas a message canceling everything. "I can't do this," she muttered to herself, silent tears running down her cheeks. "I can't let him down like this." With a heavy heart and a whirling mind, Molly made a decision. She wouldn't go to the wedding rehearsal. She couldn't face the stares, the judgments, the fear of not being good enough. Grabbing her bag and a coat, she left the apartment in the dead of night. Her steps took her automatically to the one place where she had always felt safe and at peace, the public library. As she walked through the dark streets of New York, Molly fought against the whirlwind of emotions in her chest. Love for Lucas, fear for the future, shame for her weakness. She knew she was letting everyone down, especially herself, but at that moment, hidden among the familiar bookshelves of the library, it was the only place she felt able to breathe. What Molly didn't know was that her absence at the wedding rehearsal would trigger a series of events that would test not only her love for Lucas, but also the strength of her own character. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was elegantly decorated for the wedding rehearsal. White flowers and silk ribbons adorned every surface, creating an ethereal and romantic atmosphere. Impeccably dressed guests circulated, champagne glasses clinking in animated conversation. However, in the center of all this opulence, Lucas Hawthorne was far from feeling festive. His eyes kept checking his wristwatch and then the entrance to the ballroom. Molly was late, very late. A knot of worry formed in his stomach as the minutes passed. Maybe she got stuck in traffic, he muttered to himself, trying to calm his nerves. But as time passed and there was no sign of Molly, Lucas's worry turned to panic. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Ignoring the curious looks and whispers of the guests, Lucas grabbed his phone and hurried out of the hall. His calls to Molly went straight to voicemail, increasing his anxiety with each attempt. It was then that an idea struck him like a bolt of lightning. "The library?" he said out loud, attracting the attention of some passers-by on the hotel sidewalk. Without hesitating, Lucas ran into the street, flagging down the first cab he saw. "New York Public Library, please. And fast." On the way, Lucas's mind raced. He knew that something had been bothering Molly over the last few days. She seemed distant, preoccupied. He had attributed this to the stress of the wedding preparations, but now he realized that there was something deeper going on. Arriving at the library, Lucas climbed the marble steps 2 at a time. The building was almost empty at that time of night, with only a few latecomers and staff circulating. Lucas made his way through the corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. It was when he reached the classical literature section that he saw her. Molly was curled up in an armchair in the corner, a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice open on her lap, but her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "Molly," he called softly, approaching her carefully. She startled, her eyes widening at the sight of him. "Lucas, what are you doing here?" He knelt down beside her, taking her hands in his. "Looking for you. Molly, what's going on? Why didn't you come to the rehearsal?" Her eyes filled with tears, and Lucas felt his heart squeeze. I can't do this, Lucas. I can't marry you." The words hit Lucas like a punch in the gut. "What? Molly, please talk to me. What's bothering you?" Molly took a deep breath, the words coming out in a torrent. "I don't belong in your world, Lucas. Your family, your friends, they all look at me like I'm an intruder. And maybe I am. I'm just an ordinary librarian from Brooklyn. How can I live up to being Lucas Hawthorne's wife?" Lucas felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had been so focused on his own journey of self-discovery that he hadn't fully realized Molly's insecurities. "Molly, listen to me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're not ordinary. You're extraordinary. You've shown me a world beyond business and money, a world of passion, of knowledge, of genuine connections." He paused, gathering his courage for what he needed to say next. "But there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Molly looked at him, confused and apprehensive. Lucas took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change everything. "In the beginning, when we met, it was because of a bet." He saw the shock and pain cross Molly's face, and quickly continued. "My friends dared me to marry someone outside my usual social circle. I arrogantly accepted. But Molly, what started out as a stupid bet turned into the most real and precious thing in my life." Tears were streaming down Molly's face now, and Lucas felt his own eyes fill with water. "I fell in love with you, Molly. Not because of the idea of you or what you represent, but because of the wonderful, intelligent, and compassionate person you are. You've changed me, made me a better person." Molly was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had just heard. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but firm. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lucas held her hands tighter. "Because you deserve the truth. Because I want to start our life together without secrets. And because I want you to know that, bet or not, what I feel for you is real and deep." He stood up, gently pulling her with him. "Molly Jenkins, I love you, not for what you can be or what others think you should be, but for what you are. Intelligent, compassionate, strong, the woman who taught me the true meaning of love and partnership." Lucas wiped a tear from Molly's cheek with his thumb. "I understand if you can't forgive me. But know that, for me, you are more than enough. You're everything." The silence that followed seemed interminable. Molly looked deeply into Lucas' eyes, searching for the truth in his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaky but determined. "Lucas, I need time to process all this. But I know one thing for sure. What I feel for you is real. And maybe it's time we faced our fears together." At that moment, surrounded by the scent of old books and the quiet of the library, Lucas and Molly took the first step towards a new chapter in their lives. A chapter based not on bets or expectations, but on honesty, understanding, and a love that transcended appearances and the judgments of the outside world. The dawn in New York brought with it an electric energy that hovered over the city. It was the day of Lucas Hawthorne and Molly Jenkins' wedding, an event that had captured the attention of high society and the media. The Plaza Hotel, the setting chosen for the ceremony, had been buzzing with activity since the early hours of the morning. In the luxurious presidential room, Lucas was adjusting his bow tie in front of the mirror, his fingers trembling slightly. The tailored tuxedo fit his athletic body perfectly, but it was his face that caught the eye. His normally confident eyes now reflected a mixture of anxiety and hope. Is everything all right, son? Theodore Hawthorne's voice cut through the silence in the room. Lucas turned to face his father, noticing the worried expression on the family patriarch's face. I'm fine, Dad. Just nervous, I guess. Theodore approached, placing a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. Lucas, are you sure about this? It's not too late to… Dad, Lucas interrupted him, his voice firm. I love Molly. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Theodore sighed, a resigned smile forming on his lips. I know. It's just… well, you know how much your mother and I worry. Lucas nodded, understanding his parents' worries. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster for everyone. After the revelation in the library, Molly and he had gone through difficult times, but also deep, honest conversations that had only strengthened their bond. Trust me, Dad, said Lucas, his voice full of conviction. Molly is exactly who I need in my life. On the other side of the hotel, in an equally luxurious suite, Molly was sitting in front of an ornate dressing table, watching her reflection with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Her wedding dress, a unique design that combined classic elegance with modern touches, hugged her curves gracefully. Olivia, her maid of honor and best friend, was carefully adjusting her veil. Moll, you look absolutely stunning, she said, her eyes shining with emotion. Molly smiled, but it was a strained smile. Thank you, Liv. I can't believe this is actually happening. Olivia knelt down beside her friend, holding her hands. Hey, look at me. You deserve this, Molly. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Olivia's words brought tears to Molly's eyes. The last few weeks had been an intense journey of self-discovery and growth. After Lucas' revelation about the bet, Molly went through a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, but also love, a deep and true love that overcame her insecurities and fears. What if I'm not up to it, Liv? Molly whispered, giving voice to the fear that still lurked in her heart. What if, after today, everyone realizes that I'm just an ordinary girl from Brooklyn? Olivia held Molly's face between her hands, looking directly into her eyes. Molly Jenkins, listen to me. You're not ordinary. You're extraordinary. And if someone can't see that, it's their problem, not yours. Olivia's words calmed Molly's heart, but her anxiety still persisted. She stood up, walking over to the window to look out over the city that never sleeps. New York looked different today, as if the whole metropolis was breathing in anticipation of the event that was about to take place. Meanwhile, in the hotel's main hall, the guests were starting to arrive. The cream of New York society mingled with simpler faces, Molly's friends and family from Brooklyn. It was a fascinating contrast, a perfect reflection of the union that was about to be celebrated. Lucas stood at the altar, his heart beating fast in his chest. He looked anxiously at the doors of the hall, waiting for the moment when Molly would appear. His friends, the same ones who had proposed months ago, were in the front row, their faces a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The minutes seemed to drag by. The soft music that filled the room did little to calm Lucas' nerves. He thought about everything that had happened since that night in the bar, how a silly bet had turned into the truest love he had ever felt. Suddenly, a murmur went through the crowd. The doors to the hall opened slowly, and all eyes turned to the entrance. Lucas' heart stopped for a moment. There, radiant and more beautiful than he had ever seen her, was Molly. Her dress shimmered softly under the lights in the hall, but it was her face that captured all the attention. Her eyes, normally shy, now shone with a confidence and love that made Luke's heart race. As Molly began her walk down the aisle, Lucas felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Love, gratitude, an unshakable certainty that, no matter what the future held, they would face it together. However, when their gazes met, something unexpected happened. A flash of hesitation crossed Molly's face, so quickly that only Lucas noticed it. It was at that moment that he understood. Despite all the love they shared, there were still things unsaid, fears not faced. As Molly approached the altar, Lucas knew that the next few moments would define not only their marriage, but the rest of their lives. What would happen next would surprise everyone present and change the course of that day forever. The hall of the Plaza Hotel was immersed in a reverent silence when Molly finally reached the altar. Her eyes met Lucas, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. It was as if they were alone, connected by an invisible thread of shared emotions and silent promises. The officiant smiled gently at the couple before addressing the congregation. Dear friends and family, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Lucas Hawthorne and Molly Jenkins. As the words flowed out, Molly felt her heart beating hard against her chest. She looked at the crowd of faces, some familiar, some strange, and felt the weight of her expectations. On Lucas's side, New York's elite, impeccably dressed and watching with curious eyes. On his side, simpler but equally attentive faces of friends and family from Brooklyn. The officiant continued, "Before we proceed with the vows, the bride and groom would like to share a few words." Lucas stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Molly. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, Molly raised her hand, surprising everyone. I'd like to speak first, if possible," she said, her voice shaky but determined. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. Lucas, although momentarily disconcerted, nodded encouragingly. Molly took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve in her gaze. "Before we exchange our vows," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word, "there's something I need to share. Not just with Lucas, but with all of you." The hall fell absolutely silent, all eyes fixed on the bride, who suddenly seemed to glow with an inner light. "For years I've carried a secret, a pain that has shaped who I am," Molly continued. "When I was 16, I suffered an accident that left scars not just on my body, but on my soul." Tears began to form in Molly's eyes, but her voice remained steady. "I was on my way home from school when a car lost control. The accident, it left me with visible scars, but it was the invisible scars that tormented me the most." Lucas, surprised by the revelation, reached out to hold Molly's hand, offering silent support. "For years, I hid behind books and a facade of invisibility," she continued. "I believed that I didn't deserve to be loved, that no one could see me beyond my scars and insecurities." Molly looked directly at Lucas, her eyes full of emotion. "When I met Lucas, something changed. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not for my scars or for what I could be, but for what I am." She turned to the audience, her voice now filled with a strength that surprised everyone. "I'm here today not just to marry the man I love, but to finally accept myself, with all my imperfections and scars." A palpable silence hung over the hall. Molly could see tears in the eyes of many guests, including Olivia and, surprisingly, Victoria Hawthorne, Lucas's mother. Lucas, deeply touched by Molly's courage, stepped forward. "Molly," he began, his voice laced with emotion, "you are the bravest and most incredible person I have ever met. Your scars, visible or not, are part of what makes you unique and extraordinary." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "When I first met Molly, I thought I was embarking on a simple adventure. What I didn't know was that I was about to embark on the most important journey of my life." Lucas turned his gaze to Molly, his eyes full of love and admiration. "You taught me the true meaning of beauty, courage, and love. Your scars are not marks of weakness, but medals of strength and overcoming." A murmur of approval ran through the hall. Even the most skeptical guests seemed touched by the sincerity and emotion of the moment. "Molly Jenkins," Lucas continued, his voice firm and full of conviction, "I love you not in spite of your scars, but including them. They are part of the incredible woman you are, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." Tears flowed freely down Molly's face now, but they were tears of relief and happiness. She felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The officiant, visibly moved, sniffled before speaking. "Well, I think those were the most powerful vows I've ever heard. Lucas Hawthorne, do you take Molly Jenkins to be your wife, promising to love and respect her, in sickness and in health, all the days of your life?" Lucas smiled, his eyes never leaving Molly's. "I accept, with all my heart." And do you, Molly Jenkins, take Lucas Hawthorne to be your husband, promising to love and respect him in sickness and in health all the days of your life? Molly took a deep breath, a radiant smile lighting up her face. I do, today and always. As the couple exchanged rings, a feeling of admiration and respect hung over the assembly. What had begun as a high society wedding had turned into a celebration of true love, acceptance, and overcoming. However, as Lucas and Molly prepared to seal their commitment with a kiss, no one could have predicted the surprising twist that was about to take place, a revelation that would shake the foundations of that already emotional day. The lobby of the Plaza Hotel was immersed in an electric atmosphere. Molly's revelations were still ringing in the ears of everyone present, creating an atmosphere charged with emotion and anticipation. Lucas and Molly stood hand in hand before the altar, their eyes fixed on each other, ready to seal their love with a kiss. However, before their lips touched, Lucas took a step back, surprising everyone. A murmur of confusion ran through the assembly. "Wait," said Lucas, his voice firm but trembling with emotion. "There's something I need to say too." Molly looked at him with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. What else could be revealed on this already emotionally charged day? Lucas turned to face the guests, his face a mask of determination. "Friends, family, Molly is not the only one who has carried a secret until today." The silence that followed was so thick you could hear a pin drop. Theodore and Victoria Hawthorne exchanged worried glances, while Lucas's friends leaned back in their chairs, puzzled. "When I met Molly," Lucas continued, his voice gaining strength, "it wasn't by chance. It was because of a bet." A shocked whisper ran through the room. Molly, who already knew this, squeezed Lucas' hand in silent support. "My friends dared me to marry someone outside my usual social circle. Someone ordinary." Lucas paused, swallowing. "I arrogantly accepted the challenge." The looks of disapproval and shock were palpable. Lucas could feel the judgment weighing on him, but he continued, determined to expose the whole truth. "What started out as a silly bet turned into the greatest blessing of my life. Molly showed me a world beyond business and money, a world of compassion, of true love, of genuine connections." He turned to Molly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Molly, you didn't just accept my flaws. You inspired me to be a better person. You taught me what really matters in life." Lucas then addressed the audience again. "I'm here today not just to marry the woman I love, but to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness to Molly, for how it all began. Forgiveness to you, my friends and family, for being so shallow and arrogant." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But most of all, I'm here to thank you. To thank Molly for giving me a chance, for seeing past my millionaire playboy facade and seeing the man I could be." Lucas. Words reverberated through the hall. Many guests had tears in their eyes, touched by the raw honesty of his words. "Today," he continued, his voice full of emotion, "I'm not just getting married. I'm committing to being the man Molly deserves. To be someone who values character over appearance, compassion over social status." Lucas turned to his parents, who were watching him with a mixture of shock and pride. "Dad, Mom, I know you haven't always understood my recent choices, but I hope you can see how much Molly has changed me for the better." Victoria Hawthorne, with tears in her eyes, nodded slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. Lucas then turned to his friends in the front row. "Guys, thanks for that stupid bet. Without it, I would never have known true love." Finally, he turned to Molly, holding her hands tightly. "Molly Jenkins, you accepted me with all my flaws and insecurities. You saw beyond my name and my bank account. You loved me for the man I am and the man I can be, and I promise, here and now, to spend every day of the rest of my life repaying that love." The silence that followed was palpable. Then, slowly, someone began to applaud. Soon, the whole hall was on its feet, applauding and crying, moved by the honesty and vulnerability shown by Lucas and Molly. Olivia, with tears streaming down her face, smiled at her best friend. Lucas' parents, initially shocked, now looked at their son with a new respect and understanding. The officiant, visibly moved, sniffled before speaking. Well, I think we can all agree that we have witnessed something truly special today. Love, in its purest and most honest form, has the power to transform not just two people, but everyone around them. He turned to Lucas and Molly, smiling gently. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife. You may seal your love with a kiss. As Lucas and Molly kissed, the explosion of applause and cheers was deafening. Their love had touched every person present, transforming a high society wedding into a celebration of honesty, growth, and true love. However, as the newlywed couple turned to face their new life together, no one could have predicted the surprising twist that was about to happen, a final revelation that would add another layer of depth to this already unforgettable day. The hall of the Plaza Hotel was vibrating with the energy of the moment. Lucas and Molly, newly declared husband and wife, walked down the center aisle, their faces beaming with happiness. The guests applauded, some wiping away tears, others smiling broadly. It was a moment of pure joy and celebration. As the couple approached the ballroom doors, ready to make their triumphant exit, a deep, emotional voice cut through the air, silencing the crowd. "Molly!" All eyes turned to the back of the hall. Standing there was a middle-aged man, his gray hair contrasting with his bright blue eyes that were surprisingly familiar. Molly froze, her face paling visibly. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. A murmur of shock ran through the assembly. Lucas, sensing Molly's sudden tension, squeezed her hand in silent support. The man began to walk towards the couple, his steps hesitant but determined. "Molly, my dear, I know I have no right to be here, but—" Olivia, Molly's best friend, stepped forward, as if to protect her. "Mr. Jenkins, what are you doing here?" The man, Mr. Jenkins, stopped a few steps away, his eyes fixed on Molly. I came to ask for forgiveness, and to tell you how proud I am of the incredible woman you've become." Molly, still in shock, found her voice. "Proud? You abandoned me. You abandoned us. Why now?" "Mr." Jenkins lowered his gaze, the shame evident on his face. "I made the biggest mistake of my life by leaving. Fear, cowardice, made me run away from my responsibilities. But never for a day did I stop thinking about you. Stop worrying." He raised his eyes again, tears now flowing freely down his face. "I've been watching you from afar, Molly. I've seen your graduation, your achievements in the library. And today, well, I couldn't miss the most important day of your life." Lucas, feeling the need to protect Molly, stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins, with all due respect, this is a delicate moment. Perhaps we could—" But Molly interrupted him gently, her eyes never leaving her father's face. "Why now?" she repeated, her voice firmer this time. Mr. Jenkins took a deep breath. "Because I finally found the courage I should have had years ago. Because I've seen the strong, incredible woman you've become, despite my absence. And because I want to offer my support and unconditional love, if you give me the chance." The silence that followed was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Molly, waiting for her reaction. Lucas squeezed her hand again, a silent reminder that he was there for her, no matter what she decided. Molly closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. When she opened them again, there was a mixture of pain, hope, and determination in her gaze. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "your absence left a hole in my life that I thought would never be filled. I spent years wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough to make you stay." Mr. Jenkins made a point of speaking, but Molly held up her hand, silencing him. "But today," she continued, "I learned something important. I learned that I'm worthy of love, regardless of my insecurities or my past. And part of that lesson came from your absence." She took a step towards her father, her eyes softening. "I can't promise it will be easy. There's a lot to be rebuilt between us, but I'm willing to try." The tears now flowed freely down Mr. Jenkins' face. He hesitantly held out his arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Molly moved in for a cautious but sincere hug. The whole room seemed to hold its breath, witnessing this intimate moment of reconciliation. Lucas watched, his eyes shining with a mixture of emotions: pride in Molly, understanding of the importance of this moment, and a new determination being born in his heart. When Molly and her father finally parted, Lucas stepped forward, extending his hand to Mr. Jenkins. "Welcome to the family, sir. I hope we can all walk together from now on." Mr. Jenkins shook Lucas' hand, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you, son, for looking after my little girl when I couldn't." Molly, wiping away tears, looked at Lucas with renewed love. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "we'll face it together." Lucas smiled, pulling her close. "Always together," he promised. The officiant, visibly moved, sniffled before addressing the guests. "Well, I think we've witnessed not only the union of two hearts today, but also the healing of old wounds and the birth of new beginnings. May this be a reminder to us all of the transformative power of love and forgiveness." As Lucas and Molly turned to face their guests, now with Mr. Jenkins at their side, there was a palpable feeling that this was not just the end of a ceremony, but the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A journey of love, acceptance, and continuous growth. And so, under the emotional gazes of friends and family, Lucas Hawthorne and Molly Jenkins Hawthorne took their first steps as husband and wife, ready to face any challenge the future might bring with open hearts and unconditional love. If you were in Molly's shoes, would you be able to forgive your father after years of abandonment? Why? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.